Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel where today we are going to be doing another recent reads. And I have so many books to talk about because I have been reading quite a bit because I am trying to get through my Magical Readathon TBR before school starts. So I'm reading a ton. A lot of the things on my list were also like short stories and graphic novels and novellas and those kinds of things. So I've been finishing quite a bit of them. So we are just going to jump right in with the very first thing I want to talk about, which happens to be the first thing that I finished for the readathon, and that is Ajax by Kelsie Calloway. And this is an adult romance short story. It's only 48 pages long, but we're following our female main character who has to get up the mountain to her parents' house to get them some supplies before this blizzard hits. And unfortunately, her car is like in the shop, so she is calling around for anybody to take her up this mountain, and the only person available is Ajax, her ex-boyfriend. And this is all great for Ajax because he's pretty much decided that he wants to get back together with our female main character. And the story goes from there. And I am going to say that I really just did not like this. Not the worst thing I've ever read, for sure. In the beginning, I definitely was not vibing with the writing style. It wasn't horrible, but it was like not my particular cup of tea. And it was going along and it was okay until we got to the last bit, which was the one big sex scene. And there were two things that kind of really rubbed me the wrong way. And the first is that there was some light kink shaming. And like it could be argued that it was like, oh, it's what the character said, so it's their thoughts and such, and it's in character. And I don't really buy that because we really didn't spend any time fleshing out these characters at all. So like they could say literally anything and it would be in character. But also I just don't really want that in my books. Period. So I did not appreciate that. But the bigger problem was that once we did get to that sex scene, there was literally no discussion about protection. How are we preventing pregnancy? How are we preventing STIs? Do you know, like, when was last time you got tested? Any of that. It's just shove it in and go. And like, I know a lot of people are really okay with that, but I'm not. It's not my cup of tea at all. And so I got to the end and I was just like, you know what? It really just was not happy making for me. Like I said, it's not the worst thing I've ever read, but I just did not like it. So I ended up giving it 2 stars. And then I picked up Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. And this has been translated from Japanese, but I forgot to write down the translator's name. But this is about a little cafe where you can go and have this special cup of coffee brewed at this one table, whatever, and you can actually go back into the past. And the big rule is that you have to come back before the coffee gets cold. And so this is like 4 kind of short stories about people who have done this. And I DNF'd it. I DNF'd it 30 pages in. I really did not like the writing style. There's also some light sexism about like how the female characters are characterized. It's not the super obvious kind of thing, but it was definitely, I was not vibing with it at all. So I actually ended up going onto Goodreads to look up some reviews to see if it got better. And what I found out is 1, it does not, and 2, I'm really going to hate the last story of the book. I would have if I had continued on. And so I was just like, cool, I'm good. I don't need to read this. And so I just DNF'd it. And then I picked up I Love Him to Pieces by Evonne Tsang, illustrated by Janina Gorison. And this is the first book in the My Boyfriend is a Monster series, which is a young adult graphic novel romance kind of series. And in this one, we're following these 2 teenagers as they start dating right on the cusp of the zombie apocalypse, and they have to survive. And this was adorable. Honestly, I really thought it was just fun. It I really liked the characterization of these two kids and like how they interact with each other, how they interact with the other people in their life, and how their romance kind of happens. It just felt very reminiscent of being a teenager. I think that the author just nailed that. I also really appreciated that like we did get the clues of the build up for this zombie apocalypse in the background. So like, you know, they notice that there's like more ambulances and stuff going by or whatever. It's put into the background. It's very obvious hints, but it is at least still in the background so that when it comes that like, hey, a zombie apocalypse is happening, it's not out of left field, which is again, really nice. So ultimately I had a really fun time with this. There's like 9 or 10 books in this series and I am absolutely going to look into them. But I gave this 3.5 stars. And then I picked up Nubia, Real One by L.L. McKinney and illustrated by Robin Smith. And this is a young adult graphic novel. It's a superhero story. Nubia is a superhero. Basically, she is an Amazon, and a very special one at that does not know why she has these superpowers. All she knows is that she has them and she has to keep them secret. Very Clark Kent, right? But also she's a Black teenage female. And so it is very like extra critical for her to keep these superpowers secret. And this is the story where she is a teen trying to figure out her place in the world and why she has these superpowers and like how she should proceed. And it's a really good one, actually. I really, really enjoyed this. This is, I really like origin stories where a person figures out that they have superpowers or they figure out why they have superpowers, and I love watching them make the choice to be a superhero. That, yes, this is dangerous, but it's the right choice and I'm going to go through with it. This is also a story that absolutely does not flinch from what it is like to be a teenager in the US right now. And especially, it does not flinch away from being a Black teenager. So there are some pretty heavy topics in this. It's definitely done with like the audience in mind, that it is still appropriate for young adults, but it gets into it. And so I genuinely really, really appreciated that. The other thing that I will note is that it is, the dialogue it took a little bit of getting used to for me because it is Black characters talking to Black characters. And so it is not like middle class white English. And I'm glad for it, honestly, because like it should be true to life. And so it did take me a little bit of getting used to, but it was fine. It was good. The art is actually really interesting. And I didn't necessarily appreciate it at first, but honestly, as the story went on, I think that it really added to the story, like how it was drawn, how it was colored. I think it was just done really well. And so I ended up giving this 4 stars. And then I picked up Serenity, Volume 3, The Shepherd's Tale by Joss Whedon, Zack Whedon, and Chris Samney. And this is a graphic novel, adult, and it's really short. It's like a little over 50 pages, I think. But this is telling the backstory of this character, Shepherd Book. This is a book this is actually a graphic novel that I read quite a while ago, and I loved it. And I immediately put it on my wish list, and then like I couldn't get my hands on a copy until very, very recently. My friend was selling one, so I snatched it right up, and I reread it. And it was great, honestly. Like, it was still just as good. I love I love Shepard's backstory, period. But how it's told is so good. And the structure of this comic really works for the telling of this backstory. I love that we start at the end of Shepard's life and we move backwards in time with these short flashbacks, and just generally how it's held together and how these flashbacks kind of lead into one another. I just think the whole thing was handled really, really well. It's an interesting story in and of itself. So yeah, I loved it, and I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. And then I picked up Driftwood by Marie Brennan. And this is an adult fantasy, I think, and it's a short novel. It's like 200 pages, but it's about this place called Driftwood. And basically, if your world has suffered an apocalypse, then the part that didn't completely die off, that still has some people, will end up in this place called Driftwood. And essentially it's like you add into the ring on the outside and like whatever's left of your world, and then it kind of moves forward into the middle, and as it moves forward you lose pieces of your world until you get to the center, and then it disappears completely. And anybody who is they call it a one blood, but basically just the one species that belong to that world, they also disappear along with their world. And so that's the setting of this. And we are following a set of characters who tell the legend of one man who is a one blood, but his world apparently is long gone for so many generations. It's been gone. So he should be dead too, but he's not, until they think maybe he's dead now. And so we are at his memorial and people are telling stories about him. And that is pretty much this book. Which is interesting, actually. Like, once I figured out that that's what we were doing, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. It did take me a while to figure out that that's what was going on, but once we got into it, I really like that structure, because what it ends up doing is it gives a through line and a structure to essentially 4 separate short stories within this book, as people are telling stories about this man called Last. And so, like, I loved the short stories because it allowed us to explore these different cultures who are very, very different from each other within the context of having this through line of this one character that appears in all of them. And it just, I don't know, it just really worked. I loved the exploration. I loved the stories in and of themselves. The what was happening at this memorial was interesting in and of itself. Like, it did leave me with a few questions, so I'm gonna have to go back and reread it because I think I may have missed a few things in the beginning as I was trying to figure out what was even happening. But ultimately I really liked it. The other thing, by the way, that I did find confusing, there are a ton of characters, and especially like at this gathering that's happening, and I found that the names didn't really stick in my head as easily as I would have liked, so I got pretty confused about who was who, which is also why I kind of want to reread this. But ultimately, I still think it was really, really well done. It was interesting, and I had a good time reading it. So I gave it 4.25 stars. So that is it. Those are the things that I wanted to talk about today. Just as a preview for next time, I already have read 3 more books. I am in the midst of 2 others that I will probably be finishing within the next couple of days. So I will need to do another one of these again. But the Magical Readathon is going really well. And yeah, so that's it. If you have any thoughts or feelings about any of the books that I have mentioned in this video, please leave me a comment down below. But that's it. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to, and until next time, have happy reading, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!